Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you some cozy fantasy recommendations. Now, I have actually got one sci-fi on here, but cozy fantasy is the thing at the moment. It's what everyone is craving. So I thought, what better way to join in the hype than to recommend some of my favorites, especially some of the ones that I don't think get enough love. So let's talk about those. Now, before we get into those, I do actually have two that are very popular, but that people may not know are cozy. So I thought I would start off with those. The first one I have is Discworld by Terry Pratchett. If you're on the hype for some cozy fantasy, Discworld it's very cozy. It's comedic. It has a lot of very impactful discussions, like a lot of the cozy fantasy have been having, the importance of discussing things, but without it being in this really harrowing and hard to consume way. And I think that's one of the things that Terry Pratchett actually perfected. So it's definitely a fantastic place to be starting if you're wanting something that is lighter and easier to get into, but still has this epic fantasy side to it and also has these important conversations. I think that Terry Pratchett is a master for combining all three of these elements to make Discworld. Discworld is a huge series that contains lots of smaller arcs within it, but it is all set in this world that is the Discworld, which is a disc that is on the back of 4 elephants that are on the back of a turtle floating through space. And we have the Wizards series, we have Death, we have the Witches, and they each have different things that they like to focus on and discuss. I really appreciate Terry Pratchett's input into this genre, and I think the same way we see Tolkien as the creator of epic fantasy, I think when we look back, we will probably look at Discworld as the creator of cozier fantasy. As for the only sci-fi that I have on here, and yes, it's a cheat, but you can't talk about cozy fantasy without talking about Wayfarers by Becky Chambers. This is the coziest of cozy fantasies. It is just a focus on characters and discussions around their lives and seeing things from someone else's perspective. It's very low stakes and it is simply discussions. And I think that it is done in a really, really healthy way. I think that you do have a little bit of moralizing in here. It is very liberal in its approach, but it also has just some interesting conversations, like for example how aliens would perceive our consumption of cheese and milk, for example. And I really like the things that Becky Chambers decides to take into consideration when it comes to humans. It's going out to look in, and I really like that, and they're so cozy. The first book is about the crew of the Wayfarer, and then after that, the other books are following a character here or there, or there'll be crossover characters, possibly secondary characters from a first book, or then be the protagonists of the second or whatever. But overall, they are really wholesome stories that's sole purpose is to discuss who we are as a society, as a community, different approaches to life, different ways of thinking, and I really appreciated that. Now getting into some self-pub that I think maybe you'll have heard less of, that I think if you're looking for some cozy fantasy, this is the way to go. I'm going to start with the Miss Percy's Guidebooks series, the first book being Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Olson. This series, I've read books 1 and 2. The third book I hope is coming out in 2024, and I love this series. It's basically if you took Jane Austen or Bridgerton and chuck dragons in the mix. But one of the things that I really love about this series is that we have an older protagonist. I think Mildred is in her late 30s or early 40s at the beginning of the series. And the love interest also isn't some dashing hot young man. He's a priest. We have just these very sweet, wholesome encounters. We have someone who has decided that her life isn't over while she's in her 40s. We have someone who is going to go on and take on the world later on in life. She's not this young sprightly thing. She is an older woman who is for the first time deciding to be who she is and do what she wants to do in a society that definitely does not accommodate women for that very easily. And overall, we just have this increasing amount of characters that we grow to love, and it's got stakes, but they're low. And we've got this baby dragon in the first one. You have this Regency woman trying to figure out what the heck to do with this dragon. And I love that so much. So for the most part, I just think that it's a really, really good take on Regency. It's a really good take on fantasy. And then a combination of the two creates for amazing cozy fantasy. The next one that I have is actually the Sin Eater series by J.R. Snyder. This is one that I love this series and not enough people talk about it, and need to bring it up at least once a year so that more people will read it. And the first book, which is A Season of Ravens, is we're following a Sin Eater and his bird who is amazing. They basically go to different towns and they're kind of like a supernatural investigator, but if you took it to like fairy tales. So he'll investigate like the witch of a forest and like if she is actually doing evil things or not. And one of the things that I really, really appreciate is, one, it's got that Witcher vibe of like, what is the line between monster and not a monster? It also has a Scooby-Doo-ness where it's like, is it actually a human that is kind of pinning it on this monster? Just lots of different elements of like investigation. So if you took The Witcher and you took Scooby-Doo and put them in fairy tale world, you've got Sin Eaters. And I love this series. You can actually get one of the novellas for free if you join the author's website, so I will link it down below. The story that you can get is The Vampires of Thorkirch, and it's so cute and I love it. And I love this series because it's not got particularly high stakes, but it's still emotionally impactful and it's very, very sweet and wholesome and everything you'd want out of a cozy fantasy. So if you're a fan of The Witcher, but you also are a fan of cozy fantasy, you've got to try this series. There is a novella as well that you can purchase, which is Songs of Stone, and that one is like a ghost ship. So you've got vampires, you've got ghost ships, you've got witches. There's so many different tropes that are tackled within this. You have a really, really lovely protagonist to follow, and for the most part I just want more people to read this series, can you tell? And the last one I have on here is The Mages in the Mundane series by Julienne Munich. Now this is one that I read in December. It's a trilogy and then it has a prequel novel which is Matilde of the Mages, and this is basically like Regency style fairy tales with mages. Like, so if you took like witchy books but put them in the Regency era and then gave everything a fairy tale vibe, then you've got Mages in the Mundane. So it's a really nice combination of tropes, of vibes, of feels, but also it's really easy reading. They're really fun to get through. They're just, if you're looking for, if you don't want to leave the fantasy genre, if you like reading fantasy, but you're a bit tired and you need a break, this is a really good place to go because it's still very much fantasy, but it has this lightness to it that it's like eating a cupcake after you've had like a massive dinner. It's like, okay, but that's nice and light, so I can handle that. And yeah, I'd recommend. So those are some of the series that I would recommend. I will also put in the caveat that if you are looking for something shorter, if you're looking for novellas, Granby Olsen, the author of the Miss Percy Guide series, also has a collection of novellas that are slowly coming out that are also for charity, which is the Regency Bestiary for Fine Ladies and Gentlemen series, and they are fantasy romance novellas. They're normally under 100 pages and they're also very cute. We've got Centaur and Sensibility and Manticore Park out so far, and they're Regency but with like beastie monster romance kind of thing going on. So if that's your vibe, then they're also there. If you're looking for like full-length novels, then I go with the Miss Percy's books. But yes, that is everything from me for today. So I hope you've gotten a recommendation out of this, because there are some books that I really, really feel strongly about for how cute they are. I feel strongly about most of these, so I would highly recommend checking them out. I hopefully will catch you in another one soon. Bye guys!